Bhadram karnebhi shrnuyama devaha Bhadram pashyemakshabhiryajatraha Stirairangaihi tushtuvagam sastanubhihi Vyashema devahitam yadayuhu Svastina indro vrdhashravaha Svastina pusha vishwavedaha Svastina starkshyo arishtanemihi Svastino brahaspatir dadhatu Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So coming back to chapter 2, section 1, and it used the analogy of sparks from the flaming fire. And so we have now gotten back into what exactly, once the student is ready to receive the teaching, having gone through rituals, having gone through meditation, and now finally has come to the Guru, what is it that the Guru teaches to the student? And then we have entered verse 1, and it says that fire is conditioned, but it's not actually conditioned. Or you could say also the water is conditioned, but it's not actually conditioned. So the word, this conditioned, this conditioning, so fire is, the spark is conditioning the fire, or the wave is conditioning the water. So it seems like there's an actual conditioning there, but it's not an actual conditioning because the essence of the wave and the water is exactly the same. The essence of the spark and the fire is exactly the same. The spark is conditioning the fire because of the upadhi, or because of the upadhi, the water is being conditioned to appear as a wave.
Yeah, I just want to have another word for conditioning.
So what does the upadhi do? It makes something appear what it's not. Okay, so I'll do a little example here. This we have, see this pure crystal, okay? It's a pure crystal. And this crystal is what we call pure, right? It's like consciousness, just a metaphor. I know we can perceive this, but a metaphor. And you see nothing but purity in this crystal. Now I'm going to introduce a conditioner. I'm going to introduce an upadhi. And what's going to happen is something magical. So now the light is as though conditioning the crystal. The crystal is pure all the time. It is spotless. It remains pure. Now, if I see myself, like myself, the crystal, suppose the crystal is the self, and I see myself as the blue one, or now I'm the green one, and now I'm the red one, I will constantly attribute these attributes onto myself. But I am to understand that even though there is a new condition, which is what we experience every single moment, we experience a new condition, as though a new condition of how I am, what I'm not, what I want to be, what I desire, how I feel, what I think. All of these think, desire, know, don't know. All of these are upadhis, upadhi. So they as though make you, the pure consciousness, appear that which you are not. So what the verse wants to show that even though you are pure consciousness, it seems like you're being conditioned, you're being as though you're gaining attributes of various emotions and thoughts. But all throughout, you awareness remain free of them. Because if the blue was stuck onto the crystal, could the crystal then enjoy green? No. So in that same manner, just like your awareness, no thought gets stuck onto your awareness, which is why you're able to illumine the next thought. So no power of thought, no power of upadhi, that means the light here, upadhi has true power to actually condition you. So now what's the point of this discussion? The verse wants to show that even though I appear like the small person, owing to the upadhi of that potential, remember the potential we called anam, or another word was maya, owing to maya's upadhi, it as though makes you, the all-pervasive consciousness, appear like one person right now. So what does this mean directly? How am I then supposed to look at myself in the light of this knowledge now? Very simple. Even though I seem to be conditioned, I remain essentially free. Even though water seems to be conditioned, it remains free. Because whether you're a wave, a tall wave, a small wave, a tiny, teeny, weeny wave, it doesn't matter, because the wave's essence and the water's essence is the same. The spark's essence and the fire's essence is always the same. Keeping that in mind, the verse then continues and it wants to build upon this upadhi example. Is this clear so far, upadhi? Okay, so what does upadhi mean? Just one more thing. So Petra said another word for upadhi. Yes, there is. Upadhi is that which as though lends its attributes onto something else. That's upadhi. That which as though, not actually, as though lends its attributes such as color onto something else, which is the crystal. And the crystal here is the word we call upahita. Upahita. So I'm just going to write upadhi. Upadhi. As though lens. As though lens attributes to the upahita. And upahita, as though, takes on attributes, but not actually. So the crystal is as though taking on attributes. So you consciousness are as though taking the attributes of your body and your thoughts. Okay, so that's upadhi and upahita. All right, now let's see what the next verse says. Okay, verse 2, absolute nature of Brahman. Divyaha hi amurtaha purushaha sabahya abhyantaraha hi ajaha. Apranaha hi amanaha shubraha hi aksharat parataha paraha. Okay. So these are all defining words of Brahman. And it starts with self-shining. In other words, look at this. So let's go back to this example. So if there's one thing that's constantly known is the crystal, the upahita. But right now the red is not known until it's known. So there's one presence that is self-shining all the time. And this presence is the upahita. We call this consciousness, which there are two words. We say it's self-shining or self-revealing. That is your nature. That which is self-shining, shining, or self-revealing. This is Swataha Siddha. This is Swayam Prakasha. Doesn't matter in Sanskrit. I'll just put... Okay, now what does this mean? Self-shining and self-revealing. Okay, so it means that everything in your experience requires something else to reveal it, okay? Which is your presence. But do you know what I mean so far? Okay? But your presence, there's one thing if you want to call it a thing. There's one thing that doesn't need anything else, doesn't need like a second thing to say it exists, right? You need anything like a thought requires me to be there, and now thought comes, right? It requires me for that thought to appear. But do you require your amness, your knowingness that you are? Do you require anyone to reveal that for you? Right? So even like the simplest, like 1 + 1, right? You still need to be taught that 1 + 1 = 2. You have to learn like what is 1, what is plus, what is equals, and how to add. So even the simplest, you need some form of knowledge. But do you need knowledge that you are? No. So the issue is not that we don't know that we are. We all know that we are. You ask anyone, you ask a drunk person, do you know that I am? Yeah, and? But the issue is we put this amness and we mix it up with the body and mind. So now the Prakriya here wants to show how there's one thing in your experience that is self-shining and everything else requires something else to shine, requires something else. This is called bhati, anubhati. So bhati means shines, and anubhati means shines after. Okay, so let's take this cup for example. This cup shines. Why? What is this? Do you know what I mean when I say shines? It is perceived, right? It's known. Okay? So why is this cup known to us right now? The cup shines, the cup is known because of the light. So now the light, so it means the cup shines after the light. Light, cup. It shines only after the light, the sun. But then take the sun, for example. Can the sun shine if you're blind, if one's blind? Okay, I know what you mean by that. The sun will still shine. But you just have to now kind of limit this example. Does it shine for you if your eyes are closed? No. So this means the sun shines. We're saying put the light here. We'll put the light. Now light becomes shines after. And what do we have here? No. Sun shines after your eyes. Okay, eyes. Okay, so now it seems like eyes is the final shining thing, right? Okay, well, let's find out. Have you ever had a time where your eyes were looking at something or ears were hearing something, but you were daydreaming? Your mind was not available in the moment. And people were saying your name, literally the most familiar sound, you totally didn't hear them. So hearing or sight shines only after the availability of the mind. So now eyes move over here. See, light moved over here. So eyes move over here. Eyes shine only after the mind. Okay. Now, is the mind capable of registering its contents if you're in a, if you're not conscious, if you're in a coma or something, right? No, right? Because the mind can be full of contents, but if it's not pervaded by consciousness, then there's no one to know anything about the mind. Okay? So now the mind moves over here. It only shines after and consciousness. Okay, so now the last one that shines on its own. So far what we found, the cup doesn't shine on its own. The light doesn't shine on its own. The eyes don't shine on their own. The mind doesn't shine on its own. What about consciousness? Because that's the last one we have. It says consciousness shines on its own. So again, the question is, do you need anyone else to know that you are? Do you need other means of knowledge, like another light, another book to say you are? Do I need that? No. As a kid, you can grow up in the jungle, not know anything, not even 1 + 1, but you will know that I am. That amness, that self-shining, self-revealing amness is Aksharam Brahma.
Could you say it needs no attributes and all the other things do?
Yes, you could say that. It needs no other help. It needs no external help. Aksharam Brahma. Okay? Or we just say awareness. They often say that light, right, Brahman or awareness is like light. You know, they say because light is always shining, it just illumines things. Like if I have a light here in the room and we have a party here, does the party affect the light? Does a spiritual event affect the light? No. So light just shines. So now we say Brahman is like light. Just shines, reveals, reveals experiences, reveals whatever's going on. So Brahman is like light. But what's the difference between physical light, photons, and Brahman? Because you can't just stop there and say Brahman is like light. What's the actual difference?
Light you have to put on with a switch or so. And Brahman is just
everywhere.
Light is
It's still material, it's still nature.
Yeah.
Go on, more.
But it can only exist somewhere. Light can only, the food, how do you call it? The little
Yeah.
parts
Yeah.
can only exist somewhere.
Yes. In some place. Okay.
Light has a beginning and an end.
It has a beginning and end. It can only reach up to a certain distance. Okay.
Space.
it's separable from the party or the
It's separate from that which it illumines.
and with Brahma it's
Okay.
absolutely not.
Okay. But there's one more.
Darkness which is the opposite of the light.
So it has an opposite. Yeah. Whereas awareness doesn't have opposite. Okay, that's a good thing. What's an opposite of awareness? How about let's start systematic. Opposite of darkness, light. Opposite of black, white. Opposite of consciousness or awareness.
Unconscious.
And that thought arose in consciousness. Okay. So can light shine this body? Physical light. Yes, okay. So light makes this body known, but so does consciousness make the body known. Can light illumine your thoughts, physical light? No. What can illumine your thoughts? Consciousness. So even though they're both called light, consciousness is that light which illumines that which the physical light can't. Physical light can't illumine your desires, can't make your desires known. Whereas consciousness, light, makes known even those darkest of the darkest places that no physical light can reach.
So in the basic language, consciousness is more than light.
Consciousness is more than light. Yeah, it is. Light. It is a substance of physical light. Yeah.
Can you also say thoughts are more subtle than physical light?
Yes. All this susukshma. This we have discussed. It's subtlest to the subtlest. Okay. So, all right. Next one is formless. Amurtaha. What does it mean to say formless? Does it mean that it's in one form? No, formless means it's, right, formless. It's in all forms. So if it's formless, you can't put it into one particular form. So this means this consciousness reveals itself as everything. Understand? Because it's the substance of everything. Now, how do I show that it reveals as everything? Because you have to show directly there's one variable that remains in all things. Okay, let's take, that's actually sunflowers. That's amazing. Okay, so let's take leaf, right? Leaf is, okay? And then petal is, and then this, suppose it falls down, and then it's, maybe ashes, ash is, and then smoke burns, and then smoke is. And then whatever smoke turns into, whatever that is. So I can get rid of the names and forms, but I can't get rid of the isness. And that isness, in other words, everything has a certain existence to it. It can't say a flower without it first existing. So the existence of a thing is when we say, you don't say is, you don't say, hey, Jens is. You don't say, you just say Jens. But what are you assuming? What are you silently saying when I call out someone's name? Hey, you, the fact that you exist, right? You, existent one. Hey, existent one. Hey, existent one. So everything that is existent, that isness, that you cannot get rid of, that is showing you the very presence of Aksharam Brahma, which is your very nature, I am. I am. Whatever experience you want to say is. See this? Whereas we get stuck with the experience. I want a good experience of Brahman. No matter what experience it is, there's an isness about that experience. So the very Brahman is in every experience, because every experience is. The isness of the experience or emotion or thought or idea or insight is the final substance of the universe. Okay? So rather than getting caught up, you get caught up, that's fine. But eventually the mind starts to inquire, hey, that which I'm seeking never left, because it's always obtaining as the very form that is being presented to me, whatever that form is. The form is. That isness is the very substance which I am. And that substance is being conditioned by the upadhi. Therefore, you say, so despite the upadhi, it never taints the isness. It never taints the upahita. Thus, nothing ever went away. There's nothing to fix. I'm still here. The isness, that is I, the isness of a thing. The isness of the amness. I is. I is. We don't say it like that. We say what? I am. But it really is just saying I is. So the I exists. That existence is Aksharam Brahma. Next, it is inside, when I say it, I mean Aksharam Brahma, inside and outside. Inside and outside. So where is it not, right? It is all pervasive. Now, did you ever hear the statement when we say, I've been searching a long time for happiness outside, and I didn't find it. And now my journey is to go inside. Common thing. Look at that. Inside and outside. There is no looking for happiness inside. It is both inside and outside. Hey, let's go inwards. What? What's the difference? Brahman is both inside and outside. I've been searching for happiness outside. I didn't find it. Now I'm going to go inside. Error. Because the isness is both inside and outside. You see, when you look at this flower, that flower enjoys isness. That isness is the very same isness that I am. Because I is, flower is. Just the only difference is name and form changes. I is a different name, flower is a different name. Next one, free from prana. That means apranaha. In other words, Brahman or awareness is not energized by anything else. Prana means energy here. It's not energized by some external life force. There is no second entity who is energizing you, the existent one. That existence is the final substance. There's nothing after. It gets conditioned as though conditioned, that is for sure. But the isness remains as it is. That means nothing energizes you. There's no being out there who is supplying you livelihood, who is supplying you existence or consciousness. There's no second entity who's saying, okay, as long as you're good, you will exist. Your existence now is the eternal existence. That means you can't ever go out of existence because no one has any power over your existence because you are existence. Free from the mind. Amanaha. So, in other words, this consciousness or awareness is not limited by whatever you want to say about the mind now. A thought, emotion, an idea, a memory, your idea about yourself, your opinions. Your opinions about yourself is called the ego or the ahamkara. That's all ahamkara means. Opinions about this existence. That's called ego. Yeah. So ego equals opinions about existence. In other words, it doesn't really affect your existence, does it? It's just opinions. Okay. And again, we use an example of, a cup, and there's an all-pervasive space, and this, a cup is born, and now the space inside, right, the ignorant cup thinks, okay, so, I'm as big as this person. But actually, my existence is the very existence of all space. So all space is pervasive. But an ignorant cup, not knowing that, not meeting the guru or the methodology, thinks I am this much. But actually, I am much bigger. So in other words, space is never bound by the boundaries of a thought. Rather, consciousness pervades your thought, obtains as your thought, and makes that very mind known to be in that shape. That's all a thought is. When you say, I don't feel well, I don't feel well. Your mind, suppose your mind is now like this, okay? And then imagine a really ugly, figurine. I don't feel well, right? Your mind is now like this. What is the substance of this mind? I don't feel well is, right? So in other words, the upadi has as though conditioned consciousness to be as good as this really ugly substance. But the fact is, the isness of that thought is there, and that isness I am. Whereas the thought itself is just an upadi. An upadi because that's what Maya does. It just constantly shapes and shifts, as though shapes and shifts this consciousness into different forms. Into the form of the mind, into the form of a thought, into the form of an emotion. But how do you recognize that pure consciousness amidst that shaping and molding? As the isness of the fact that it is. It exists. That existence is the pure consciousness that we're speaking of. Even silence is. So you don't have to go into silence to know consciousness. Of course, it's much easier, I understand that, but as the mind develops, it's okay. It's through and through. It is pure. Shubhraha. That means it's self, consciousness, another word for consciousness. To make it more personal, sometimes we will use the word self, right? It's all the same word, self or atma, which means it's free from the color, just like I demonstrated here. It's free from, so all of these colors you can say is your likes and dislikes, desires, insights, emotions, okay? So no matter what color it is, it represents a different attribute, but it never spoils consciousness, therefore it is pure. Just like the sun, for instance, it just shines. It doesn't take any credit of under its rays that you have a saint who's performing a lovely talk outside. The sun just shines. But the sun also doesn't claim any results of actions of the murderer who's committing, under its rays. It's got nothing to do with the sun. The sun just supplies its light to both the saint's action, so that the saint can go and, shake someone's hand or something, but also supplies the light to the baddie, the bad guy, to do whatever he's going to do or she's going to do. But there's a consequence system. So that's all awareness does. Not that it does anything, but just in the presence of its light, it just shines. It shines on purity, it shines on impurity. It shines on knowledge, it shines on ignorance. You see, so purity and impurity, they are also, purity is, impurity is, knowledge is, ignorance is, which means that even knowledge, ignorance, purity, impurity are also modifications, upadhis, which depend upon the existence of its substance.
So when we see a flower, for instance, our mind is shaped in a flower, and the mind itself is shaped?
Yes, exactly. So your mind, think of your mind as, plasticine. In Australia we call it blue tack. Like very sticky stuff, right? So your mind is like plasticine. And the moment it sees, it turns. So right now, my mind is this. It's shaped with characters. Now, my mind is shaped like a flower. You see? So your mind's constantly shaping according to the external environment. And what recognizes the contents, what knows about the contents of that plasticine shaped like mind is me, the awareful one. Me that's pervading that flower mind, that flowery mind. So the knower of the flowery mind is Aksharam Brahma. Mind's constantly shaping and molding, but throughout that shaping and molding, there is an awareful presence that is illumining the contents of that mind.
And could we compare the shaping and molding of the mind to the shaping and molding of the laws?
Of the rose.
Laws.
The orders, the law.
Sure, good. So can you compare the shaping and molding of the mind to the shaping and molding of the laws? Okay, so the laws don't really shape and mold as much as the mind does. In fact, there are some laws that don't shape and mold at all, such as the law of how fast the speed of sound of light will travel. That's never going to change, right? So even if you have the next universe, that law is always going to be the same. The law of cause and effect, if I do one thing, I get a certain result. That is a law that's always going to remain the same.
If it's a law, it means that it's always like that.
Yeah,
So if it starts shaping, I would not call it a law.
Yeah, okay, that's a good point. So see, law, the only reason why you have trust in living is because you trust laws. The gravity is always going to function. See, if I want to improve my life, what do? I have to do certain corresponding actions which are linked to improving of the life. Now, how do you know that? How do you know that in order to improve my life, I have to do a certain set of actions and not those actions? How do you know that? We take it for granted because there's a law. If I want X, I need to do Y because X and Y are connected. That law never changes.
That's really cool because legislation is not human legislation is not laws actually because humans are whimsical. It's changing all the time. Culture.
We're speaking universal laws.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Good point. So we got human-created laws. Yeah.
There is in your internal inbuilt, there is a moral compass. What is right and wrong. So if you're diverting from the right path, that moral compass is always going to say, I'm doing something wrong. So if you're doing something sinful and you carry on doing that,
Yeah.
then it is you who's actually doing it because it's dependent on you. The moral compass is bringing you back.
Yeah, always.
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 And the other thing was, this upadi is your identity. That role you're playing, X, Y, Z,
Yeah.
in life, and we get so attached to those identities and forget about the
Isness.
isness. And therefore, realization is basically redefining a personality.
No personality.
Be awareful if you're diverting from a role and your goal is to that role, then you need to bring your moral compass back to that.
The moral compass personality role, this is all necessary. We call this apraptasya prapti. This is all part of being a reasonable human being, making the right choices. This is required for a clear mind to understand this knowledge. In order to understand clearly the difference between I, who is not bound by roles, not bound by dharma, not bound by anything. Okay? So we can't quite say I have to redefine my personality to self-realize. In fact, it is a stepping stone.
But you just recognize the isness, and once you recognize the isness, everything should hopefully fall into its place.
It is higher than the high. Aksharat parataha paraha. What's the highest so far? So higher than the high. So there's only two highest you can say. The highest you can see, if there is an order, there's no hierarchy to this. Brahman. And what's the next we said in that order? Potential. Free of your very power. Just like in the dream, right? You're free of that power that's manifest in the dream world. You're much bigger than that power. If you were as big as that power, then you would never wake up, right? You would never sort of just, there will be no entity that's left because the character in the dream got killed. And what happened in the character in the bed also got killed. But the character in the bed is completely safe. In other words, always bigger than the potential. Okay. We also call Brahman, sometimes another word is kutastha, anvil. You know that where you knock metal upon.
Blacksmith,
Yeah, what do you do on an anvil?
you're molding metal.
Yeah, you're constantly shaping and molding and hitting and banging and changing. But the anvil, I'm American, it was more, doesn't change. I'm like the anvil. Things get knocked upon me, I move not. In Chandogya Upanishad, there's a statement that says, Sarvam Kalu Idam Brahma, which means all that is here is Brahman. So I'm going to write this down, I'm going to analyze the statement. All this is Brahman. So let's put two words, highlights. This and Brahman. What is this referring to? Object, any object, right? And Brahman is referring to the substance of that object. Okay. So all this, in other words, it's talking about, you could say, two orders of reality. So all this has no reality without its substance. So this means that when I say this or this or this, I'm just saying modification of the substance, modification of the substance, modification of the substance. That's all you're doing. All this mithya is Brahman. All these ornaments are gold. In other words, there's no essential difference between this and that. That's why we say Purnamadav Purnamidam. That is the whole. This is the whole. You take away the whole, you take away the substance from the substance, all that remains is the substance, because there's only substance. So do you have to get rid of this to reach that? No. Wherever this is exactly where Brahman is. And how do you recognize Brahman? As the isness of this. You can change this into a million forms. The isness of what's left can't be eliminated. Let's look at all this in terms of personal experience, because I've been talking about all this over there. Let's make this right here. Your mind consists of 4 functions. The first is manas. Okay, antahkarana, the inner instrument. I'll put antahkarana. Now, the first section of this inner instrument is your emotional capacity, emoting, or doubting. Also desiring. So whenever you feel a desire, that desire manifests in the mind. Whenever you're emoting, some of us like to be very much in our hearts, always feeling things, feeling. That's basically what I've identified my eye with manas. That means I'm looking at the manas upadhi, and I want this manas upadhi to be optimized to always feel good. That means I fell for a happy upadhi. That's what I want. But it's an identification. The second is a buddhi. So you're thinking now, you're processing data. That thinker, processor, inquirer, the one that's asking questions, connecting the dots, that's the activation of the intellect. Cognitive capacities, analysis, comparison, discernment between this and that, finding patterns, common patterns. If you play a board game or chess game, your intellect is working there. And when you get happy and you win the game, what's working? Manas. 3 is chitta. So that's anything that has to do with recalling. So when we say about having a good memory, developing skills to just effortlessly recall. So that means what you're really asking is, let me develop the third aspect of my mind, the chittam. Let me be able to recite the verses and, recall these words. So it's very important, because if the memory is low, then can it really hold this? Can it really settle with this knowledge? See, so it's so important, something so small that we take for granted. And today we're not, in a favor of this memory, because phones, it's all online, right? So I always recommend personally having some kind of memory development in your life. It goes a long way. Right? It's hugely.
It's the basic of the Bloom taxonomy. It's the basic. Remember, no.
Yeah. So do you have a way to improve your memory? I don't know what it is, but I'm highly encouraging to become a interested person in recalling, in memorizing, in developing that cognitive capacities. One recommendation, of course, is Sanskrit. It basically covers all areas. Yeah. Or yeah, mantra chanting, they also said, is specifically for memory, like Rudram.
Also, learning to play a musical instrument.
Excellent. Yeah, because you have to build new connections. So anything that builds new connections is a memory improver, like a musical instrument, a new hobby. They say the older we get, the more reason you have to take on a new hobby. So I wonder, what hobby could you take up? Anything that challenges. Remember, the more pain, the greater the result. Isn't it? That's the secret of life. No pain, no gain, right? It's so true. Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnam Eva Avashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.